But reflecting back at your time at Starbucks, give me like a couple like instances where either you or Starbucks grew significantly. And let's try to dissect that and try to take how we can, let's try to replicate this in our own lives and our businesses. So moving along that timeline, you're with Starbucks, you realize that they're a people organization, help them scale to 15,000 locations. What were the evolutionary points with Starbucks that you can pinpoint, or just one or two key ones?
Well, I think the first evolution was when we figured out that this was much bigger than we thought. And how that took place was we started to open stores closer and closer together. And finally, I was up in Vancouver, British Columbia, and there's a corner called Robson and Thurlow. And it's the corner of Main and Main.
Okay.
And there was a Starbucks store on one of the corners. And it was a little tiny store at about 900 feet. And it was doing $1 million a year.
Wow.
Big volume for 900 square feet. And it had a demolition clause in the lease. It was an old building. And I was sure that the landlord was going to one day boot us out and rebuild that building because it only made sense. It was a single-story little store. And so I said to our real estate person when we were up there, see if you can get a piece of real estate kitty corner across the street. And it happened to be a heritage building. So I thought it would take us a year at least if we were ever going to get it. And 6 months later, her name was Tracy Halgrimson, and she came back and she said, Howard, I've got that store. And I said, oh, shit. Now what am I going to do? And because, we had that store, and I said, well, let's take it because we don't know. And if it, we'll try it, and we can always sublease a store across the street. I didn't know what was going to happen. The day we opened that second store, our volume on that corner doubled. We had 2 stores doing $1 million a year.
Wow.
One store we called the Bikers, and one store we called the Suits.
Okay.
And that's how different the customer base was. And that's when I really knew this thing was bigger than any of us thought. So we started opening stores closer and closer together, and it worked. We'd have stores less than a block apart, and it would work. We'd have stores in a grocery store. Then we'd have a store in that shopping center, and we might have another store across the shopping center. Matter of fact, in Seattle, we have one that has, in a shopping mall area, we have 4 stores. And so, that's the first thing. That was a huge transition. And that's when we realized this was bigger than we thought.
So you realized bigger than what you thought when you could open stores within a certain proximity from each other.
Yeah.
What does it take to get to that point? What's the tipping point where you're able to do that? Because I think at a certain point, if you're still like a smaller mom and pop with say 5 or 10 locations, that fear of cannibalizing your business is true. But what was?
Yeah, well, at 5 or 10, we weren't cannibalizing.
Yeah.
It was not till we hit about when we really realized what it was when we got close to 200 stores.
Okay, so
up until that point, we were pretty spread out.
So what was the tipping point that allowed you to do that? That I think that's not something that everybody can achieve, or is it?
No, it's not. It's a unique business. Coffee is a unique product. If you drink coffee, you drink coffee, right? And the demand for quality coffee was everywhere. Remember, every restaurant served a cup of coffee. There might be 10 restaurants in one street, or in McDonald's and Burger, whoever there was. And they're all serving coffee. So there was lots of coffee sales. And so the demand was bigger than what we thought it was. There were more people that wanted to come into our stores than we thought. And so it was just experimentation.
Mm-hmm.
The second major step, when we realized that people didn't want to just come and leave, they wanted to be able to sit down and have a conversation, even if they didn't buy a cup of coffee. And so, we started experimenting. Up until that time, I don't remember when we had about 50 stores, we only had 5 bar stools in the window, or maybe a little table or with a couple of chairs to sit on. And all of a sudden we realized people wanted to come. We had a huge internal battle inside the company. Well, how can we afford to do that? We can't just get bigger stores, right? That'll change the unit level economics, back to the unit level economics again. So we started building some bigger stores to see what happened, adding more chairs. Lo and behold, what happened? Our business increased because people like you wanted to have a meeting there.
Mm-hmm.
We even built some stores with meeting rooms. And so, that changed the business. Then as we started to expand geographically, it didn't always work right away. We were used to opening stores and having cash flow immediately. And we started to open in Denver, we opened in San Diego. Those took about a year. But we had to stay with it. Remember, persistence and patience. So we had to stay with those stores. Finally, those markets caught on. We realized then it began so we could open in a new market immediately. It took off because people knew us by that time. Even though we didn't have a store in their area, they knew who we were. And so there were steps. The biggest issue that we always had is that we never had enough good people.
Mm.
We were always behind the curve. And it was always finding the right people to get on the bus and then making sure that the wrong people left the bus, as Jim Collins says.
Yeah.
And so that was always an issue.
So
and it became an issue until we hit the downturn in 2007, 2008. Then all of a sudden we had too many people.
So two things. One, you mentioned using persistence to let a community kind of get to know you and adopt and accept you. And the other thing was not only finding the right people to get them on the seats of your bus, but also getting people off your bus. I want to touch on both of those things, but pulling back a layer on how you get these communities to accept you. I mean, I'm sure that's persistence too.
Yeah.
But how do we do that? How do we get, what were you doing? What techniques were you using to get a community to know, like, and trust you?
So that brings us all the way back to the beginning. Everything you do in life is about serving people. And if that becomes your mindset, then how you treat those people when they come through that door is everything. If you treat them with respect, with dignity, as a valued human being, if you listen to them, if you smile when it's appropriate, right? If you learn their names, if you know their drinks, and they walk through that door, and by the time they get there, their drink is ready, right? It's amazing what those kind of things do. Starbucks was about building relationships. It's just like a restaurant that you frequent often. If you walk into that restaurant, and like Glenn and I have a restaurant we love called Tillicum in Seattle, little small cafe like a New York cafe, and we love going there. We walk in and the waitress always says, "Howard, Lynn, how you doing? We haven't seen you for a while." Are you kidding me? I will never leave them. And that's the same at Starbucks, and that's what made Starbucks work. At the end of the day, it's certainly the coffee was good. The coffees are art. It had to be good, but anybody could do that. There are 21 other coffee companies when I started at Starbucks in the business. Many of them had more stores than we did. We focused on the people, on that interaction and that relationship between us and those human beings that we serve. And that's what made it work.
So what was the secret for you in Starbucks because Howard, you couldn't be in every Starbucks, right? And there was thousands of them. How are you how are these young people that you're hiring, how are you getting them to give an F about the people? What things did you do to make sure they gave that F? Get into
Well, it's difficult and simple all at the same time. It's how you treat them that makes that work. You can't be pounding them on, "Hey, how are sales? How come your sales are down?" You say, what's going on with you? Get your store cleaned up, right? All those sayings. I remember I retired once, and I came back from retirement. And I walked into a store, and on the back wall in the back room was a sign: "Be nice, be fast, be clean." And I looked at that sign. I just ripped it off the wall, and I said, "How about we put up a sign: Be human." Those fast food slogans: be nice, be fast, be clean. I want you to be human. That's what I want you to be. You'll be whatever those other things are, but we got to have clean stores, but that's not what I want you to focus on. And so we focused on being human.
Yeah.
And caring about people and how we treated them. And then, the tools that they had, and then they figured it out. I remember a guy said, there was a guy that was a district manager said, "We're kind of like Cheers, aren't we?" I said, "Yes, we are, exactly like Cheers."
I love it.
And that's who we are. And, and that's how it worked. And it still works today. And whenever we screw up, it's because we didn't get that right. Not because we made a bad cup of coffee, but when we've screwed up, it's because how we've treated somebody, when we've treated somebody poorly.
You also mentioned how to get people off the bus. And I think that's something that's really important, because we're always, sometimes we get desperate. We just need to hire people, and we make mistakes, and we're not always perfect. We make mistakes. We hire the wrong people. What things do you do to make it easy to offboard people? And I think that's go ahead.
It's communication, constant communication. it goes back to that. You're not waiting for performance reviews when somebody comes in. They're defensive anyway, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
And you say, you know something, Joe, you don't fit. Sorry, goodbye. That doesn't work. But if Joe has had constant communication about things that were working, and let's say the things that are not working just seem to be mounting up, then you're talking to Joe all the time. Joe, this is an issue. Well, how can I help you get through this? You know, Joe, we talked about this. You know, this is just really, are you really fit here? And Joe, usually what happens is Joe draws the 4 club and comes in one day and says, you know, I'm just not happy here. And Joe leaves, you know, and sometimes Joe doesn't get it. And you have to say, Joe, you really need to find something else to do with your life.
Yeah.
The important thing is love them, and love them as much going out of the company as you love them coming into the company.
Yeah, and I feel like it's just like this idea of like you say, that constant communication and opening the channels of communication to check in with them and give them these opportunities to talk to you, but also to do it from a place of compassion and not a place of like, what are you doing to me in my business, man? You're screwing up. Like, hey, are you okay? What am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
Something like talk to me. And then if you do it from a place of like, I'm mad at you, then you're just going to get the same thing in return.
You're going to get the pushback.
Exactly.
And they're going to be mad at you. And all of a sudden you're going to be missing $10 a day out of your cash flow.
Exactly.
You know?
I love it. Great stuff.
If you enjoyed this video, please help us out. You can do it by liking, sharing, subscribing, and hitting that bell icon. It really helps out. And don't forget, there's a complete archive of every episode with show notes at restaurantunstoppable.com.